Now, into the ticket office of Disneyland.
Oh boy, let's do this.
Don't think the CIA is going to be trying to hack your second-gen iPod.
I didn't think so. There might have been a lot of illegal music on there. I wouldn't doubt it. But, I mean...
You were supposed to bring death to the flagships, not join them.
Google has found a new way to piss me off.
iTunes is a constant source of embarrassment.
Every time I say it, it's going to suck even more.
May I present to you the cat?
I am Nadella. I can't do it anymore without laughing. I was going to do the whole thing.
Welcome, everyone, to the Calling All Platforms podcast. I am your host, Wes, and I'm here with Landon.
Hello.
And Caleb.
Woo!
I was very, very excited there, Caleb. Hey,
I'm so excited.
We're here to talk all things tech this week. Sorry for my being absent there. I appreciate host duties were actually passed over to Caleb because Landon won't ever do that again. What was it? Day 2 we had you host of this podcast, and then never again?
Oh,
What was it, day 3?
I did it for quite a while because we rotated for a while for...
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying. Like, we rotated, and then it was
we
actually...
rotated. No, we made it a few times through the rotation. Like, it was... it was a few months, at least.
Hey, but you remembered everybody's name, right? That's always a good thing.
I would hope that I remembered everyone's name because I'm the one that introduced you guys. You know,
It's true. There's this guy here that keeps hanging out, wants to do a podcast, I guess, with me.
Dude flipping showed up. Like, I can't get rid of him.
Showed up with a microphone and a laptop. Let's do this. Well, we're here to talk all things tech. Why don't we get into this? Looks like first up on here, we have Apple news. We got some new Macs here.
We do. Listener, Apple's exciting week of announcements was basically just 3 10-minute videos talking about some new Macs and some new processors. It was okay. It was fine. I guess I'm glad they didn't do like a 2-hour event for it because heaven knows they would have.
yeah.
So
With saying words like AI or Apple AI or something like that.
Oh my gosh. Because, that was the other quote unquote big announcement this week, aside from the new Macs, is that Apple Intelligence is finally here. 18.1, you can download it. And look, 18.2 betas. It's going to be like so soon. You're going to have all this intelligence from Apple. And, no, I'm good. I could not care less. But the Macs, these were fun. Okay, so. First up, a new iMac. And by new iMac, I mean the same iMac as we had before, but now with the M4 processor. So the base model of this sucker gets an 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, which is, I believe, equivalent to the processor that is in the iPad Pro, right? That tracks. 16 gigs of RAM, which is great. The base model for all of Apple's computers is now 16 gigs of RAM at the bottom. They even updated the MacBook Airs, which did not get a full spec bump. They're still running M2 processors and M2 and M3 processors in them, but they now have 16 gigs of RAM at the base configuration. So that's super cool. If you bought a MacBook Air 2 weeks ago, your timing was so bad, but that's just how life is with Apple. It stings a little bit when I remember how I bought my 1 gig first generation iPod Nano about 3 months before they released the second generation iPod Nano. And for the same $150 price, I would have gotten 4 gigs. So anyways,
that stings.
That's just Apple for you. So there you go. 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, 16 gigs of RAM, and 256 gigs of storage in the base model configuration of the iMac. Starts at $1,300. You can also configure this with a 10-core CPU, with a 10-core GPU, and you can upgrade your RAM to 32 gigs. You can go up to, I believe, a terabyte of storage. Wait a second. Sorry, 24 gigs of RAM is the maximum, I think.
No, 32 on the on that one.
Is it 32?
Yep.
Okay. They have their maximum generic configuration is 24 gigs, but you can option it with up to 32.
Yeah.
And then, yes, you can option it up to a terabyte of internal storage. Maybe it's 2 terabytes,
2
actually.
terabytes.
I guess I could click through and actually look, but I don't care that much. Anyways, the long and short of it is, if you can avoid paying Apple for RAM and or storage upgrades, do, because they overcharge out the wazoo for that. And you can instead just use the Thunderbolt ports that are on these devices to connect stuff. So yeah, you get 2 Thunderbolt ports on the base configuration. Anything above that, you get 4 Thunderbolt ports. And you'll also get the gigabit Ethernet jack in the power supply brick, which is still kind of a weird way to do that, but okay. Alongside the iMac, Apple also updated their accessories, the peripherals, their keyboard and mice. As we mentioned in the last episode of the podcast, that just consisted of taking the existing peripherals and replacing the Lightning jack with a USB-C port, which is an upgrade. I appreciate the update, and I appreciate that for the keyboard and the trackpad, that is generally okay. That's fine. Magic Mouse is still there. They're still selling it. Still has the port on the bottom. I'm still angry about it. That is the dumbest mouse on the planet. Do not, under any circumstances, use that as the pointing device for your Mac. Just don't. So, there you go. That's the iMac. Pre-orders are open for it right now. It's going to be available in stores and shipping to people as of the 8th of November.
Very nice.
Okay. Let's talk about the MacBook Pro, which also received a nice spec bump in the form of the M4 processor family. So, the base model 14-inch still available with an M4 processor. And then you can also get an M4 Pro and an M4 Max in the 14-inch laptop. The 16-inch, you can only get the Pro and Max, right? There's no generic M4 version in those. The most basic version of this thing with the M4 for the 14-inch has the 10-core CPU, 10-core GPU, 16 gigs of RAM, and 512 gig SSD, which is double the base configuration of storage for the iMac, which is nice. And then also, obviously, a more powerful processor. These things all now come with 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, in addition to the SD card slot, the headphone jack, the HDMI port, and the MagSafe, which I believe in the past there was just 2. If you were getting the base model 14-inch, you only got 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports. You had to upgrade to the Pro or Max version of that laptop to get more than that. So there you go. The M4 Pro on the 14-inch MacBook starts with a 12-core CPU and a 16-core GPU, 24 gigs of RAM, and 512 gigs of storage. And then you can also option out the thing with an M4 Max, which has a 14-core CPU, 32-core GPU, 36 gigs of RAM, and 1 terabyte of storage. The 16-inch starts with that 14-core M4 Pro and a 20-core GPU, and then 24 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage. And you can get a M4 Max on that with 16 cores and a 40-core GPU, which is more than the base model, than the 14-inch version of the M4 Max, as well as 48 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. If that particular model costs $4,000 as optioned, you can also get, with the M4 Max, you can get up to 128 gigs of memory, and you can still option these things with 8 terabytes of storage. Just doing those 2 things pushes it up to $7,200, which is bonkers. And
wow.
Like I said, if you can avoid paying for the RAM upgrades and the storage upgrades in Apple's computers, do. It's so ridiculously overpriced. Also new with this generation of the MacBook Pro, you can now get the nano textured glass on the displays. So Apple Apple being Apple, can't just give you a generic matte filter on top of the glass in order to help prevent glare and stuff. No, they have to nano etch the actual glass itself in such a way that you have to use a very specific type of microfiber cloth to clean it. Otherwise, you're going to like get the whole thing, fill all the little nano etched bits with tiny pieces of quartz that are going to completely ruin your monitor. It's the most Apple thing on the planet. It costs $150 if you want to do that to yourself. Honestly, kind of sounds like a bad time. So the base model of the 14-inch with the 10-core M4 starts at $1,600. Base model of the 16-inch with the 14-core M4 Pro starts at $2,500. So nice spec bumps all around. We're at this point kind of just generally familiar with the M4. It's like 25% better than the M2, which is for the most part where it's competing with. It is mostly more efficient than the M3 due to the process node that it's being manufactured on being an upgrade over the M3, but you're also getting a slight increase in IPC and stuff like that. So you're looking at like kind of 10% improvement over the M3 in terms of performance. And what is interesting, though, is that we are starting to see Geekbench scores posted online for the M4 processors, in particular the M4 Pro and the M4 Max that are in the MacBook Pro. And what's kind of fun about that particular detail is that the M4 Pro is about the same level of power, like in terms of the performance of the individual CPU cores and the multi-core performance. So just CPU benchmarks, not talking about the GPU. It scores a little bit higher, like maybe 4 or 5% better than the M2 Ultra in the Mac Pro. And then the M4 Max does about 25% better in CPU benchmarks than the M2 Ultra. Now, to be clear, there will be an M4 Ultra coming in the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro early next year, probably. Okay, this is a significant boost in power. And right now, you can actually buy a Mac Mini that is more powerful or about the same amount of powerful as a full-fat Mac Pro. Speaking of the Mac Mini, that's the computer that they actually updated, right? For both the MacBook Pro and the iMac, it's the same basic hardware package you're getting. Few small upgrades. They did update also, like the built-in cameras are slightly improved. And, you know, they do that desk mode thing on Facebook, what on earth? FaceTime, where it like shows the desk using your iPhone camera if you're doing continuity camera. That now you can do that with the built-in cameras on the iMac and the MacBook Pro. So, you know, they updated a few things in terms of the hardware, but mostly just a spec bump with the processors. And that's fine. You know, they don't need to completely redesign the hardware every flipping year. That would just get exhausting. But the Mac Mini, on the other hand, has been due for an update for a few years. Ever since I first saw teardowns of the original M1 Mac Mini, I thought to myself, you know what? You could fit 2 Mac Minis into that chassis.
Yeah.
With the size of the logic board on those things. It was just, they're tiny and they don't need the gigantic honkin' power supply because the M1 drew so little power. And ever since then, it's just kind of felt a little silly that the Mac Mini was so big versus what it needed to be for that processor, for any of the M series processors. Apple agreed. The Mac Mini has been completely redesigned and uses about half as much like internal volume on the new chassis as on the old one. So there you go. It is about the same physical dimensions, like from the top down, as an Apple TV. It's a little bit bigger. It is thicker than an Apple TV. Like it's taller than one. And in fact, it is taller than the outgoing Mac Mini design. It's about the same height, in fact, as the original Mac Mini, like the G4, PowerPC G4 powered Mac Mini from back in the day. And that thing had a CD drive on top of it.
Yeah.
So, like, it's kind of weird how tall it is. But if you look at their cutaway images, it's because they have, like, the power supply is on the bottom, and then they've cut the logic board in half and stacked it, and then designed the airflow path through the thing so that air is getting sucked in from the bottom on one side of the chassis. Like, it cycles back and forth in like an S pattern through the boards inside of the computer, and then circles around the top and gets blown out the foot on the bottom on the other side. So yeah, it's a neat little design. Highlights of this computer: the base model gets the 10-core CPU and 10-core GPU version of the M4 with 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. So that's the same base processor as is in the 14-inch MacBook Pro, not the same base processor as is in the iMac and the iPad Pro. And you can option this thing, as you could with previous generation, with an M4 Pro. You can get the Pro version, which makes it into a really compelling little prosumer computer. That thing starts with the 12-core version of the M4 Pro that has the 16-core GPU. You can option it with the 14-core M4 Pro that has the 20-core GPU as well. Starts with 24 gigs of RAM, but you can option it with up to 64, and starts with half a terabyte of storage, but you can, if you're a psychopath, go up to 8. Don't do that.
No.
Just don't. But you could. One of the most compelling reasons not to do that, however, is actually the port selection on this thing. So, as we talked about when they were rumored to be doing this redesign, they did in fact get rid of the 2 USB Type A ports from the thing. However, they replaced them with 2 Type C ports that are on the front of the chassis. Right? So they're facing you instead of just being on the back. And so, yeah, there are 2 USB-C ports there. There's also a front headphone jack. And it's that, like, the quote-unquote high-impedance headphone version of the headphone jack that Apple's been putting on their laptops for a few years now, that is also on the front for, plugging headphones into and stuff like that. On the back, you get 3 Thunderbolt ports. You still get an HDMI port and a gigabit Ethernet port. So I think that key there, you do still get the HDMI port. I love that they're still including that. And you're still getting an Ethernet jack. You can also still, on any of these configurations, get that as a 10 gigabit Ethernet jack if you want to. So M4, M4 Pro, doesn't matter. Any of them can get the 10 gig port. And that's pretty cool. If you get the standard M4 version, then the Thunderbolt ports on the back are Thunderbolt 4, which is great. That includes USB-C display or, DisplayPort pass-through and all the stuff that Thunderbolt gets you. But if you get the Pro, then it's Thunderbolt 5, which is actually, if you get Pro or the M4 Pro or M4 Max versions of the MacBook Pro, then your Thunderbolt ports on that are also Thunderbolt 5. And that's just more bandwidth than Thunderbolt 4, and I believe will do DisplayPort. I can't remember what the version is, but it allows you to push like 8K at 144 hertz through a single cable or something like that for display connection.
I've heard you can do 3 display, like 3. I can't remember if it's 3 4K or
It's
3 1080 displays
3,
out of one port.
You can do 3 4K displays out of one port.
Yeah.
And in terms of what the M4 itself will support, and this is actually kind of a fun thing, because in the past, like if you got an iMac or something like that, you could plug one external display into it and that was it. If you had the MacBook, like the base models of the MacBook Pro, right, that didn't have the M2 Pro or the M2 Max, it was just like the M2, you could connect 2 external monitors to it, but only if the lid was closed and the internal monitor was turned off, right? Previous versions of the Mac Mini were only able to support 2 external monitors. And that's kind of been a limitation of just the base model Apple Silicon processors. But now the base model Apple Silicon processors, like on the Mac Mini, can support output to 3 displays as opposed to just 2. And I believe they can do 3 6K displays at 60 hertz, I think. For just the base model, you get more performance out of the higher tier ones that have the Thunderbolt 5 ports on them. So it's a pretty sweet little computer, particularly when you consider that the base model starts at $600, which is the same as last year, and the M4 Pro version of the Mac Mini starts at $1,400. Which, for a little prosumer device like that I need to remind you, if you get the slightly upgraded version that has the 14-core CPU, that thing actually outperforms an M2 Ultra Mac Pro. So, quite a lot of performance for just such a little guy.
And that 14-core M4 Pro one starts at $1,600. So,
yeah, it's not a huge amount more.
Yeah, especially considering the Mac Studio with the Ultra chip, I think starts at like 24, something like that.
With the Ultra, I think it's $3,000.
It's a lot of money either way.
Yeah.
Like, this is basically half the price.
Yes. So yeah. It has been a pretty darn good week to be a Mac user. Generally speaking, the prices for these things have not increased over last year's products. I did confirm the education discount on the Mac Mini is still going to be $100 off. So if you have some way to leverage the education discount, like you are a parent of a college student, you're a high school student, or you work on staff at a public school or a college or something like that. Or, let's be honest, you know somebody, you're good friends with somebody who's a high school teacher or is going to school or works at a college or something like that, and you can get them to order you a computer and you can get that education discount. That brings the base model of the Mac Mini to $500, which is a really compelling price point for that computer.
Absolutely.
Now, if we look back into the distant past of the podcast, we were talking about this rumored redesign of the Mac Mini, and I made a statement to, basically along the lines of that if the base model of the Mac Mini actually gets the full version of the M4 and not some kind of neutered version, and actually gets all 5 of the USB-C ports that were rumored, the same number of ports as the higher tier Mac Minis, then that was probably going to be my next computer that I would buy. I was not expecting that. I was expecting the base model to have the 8-core M4 that's in the Mac or in the iPad Pros and is in the base model of the iMac, and I was expecting it to not have the ports on the front of the chassis, or to not have any Thunderbolt ports on it, or to only have one USB-C port on the back or something like that. I was expecting it to be worse than all of the other ones, and I was expecting to have to pay an extra $200 to $300 to actually get the Mac Mini that was worth the money. But that's not what happened. The base model of the Mac Mini gets the 10-core M4. It gets the same number of Thunderbolt 4 ports on the back as all of the rest of them. It gets both USB-C ports on the front, the headphone jack. It gets the HDMI port. It gets the gigabit Ethernet port. It's getting everything. And now 16 gigs of RAM as the base configuration. So I guess I'm buying a Mac Mini.
And listener, I've got to also say something about this because I've always had it in my brain that I'm probably I've always wanted to upgrade my Mac Mini. I've got actually the same one that Caleb has. It's the 2018 Intel based iMac. So it's the last Intel iMac or Mac Mini that came out before the M1s did. And I've always thought, okay, I'll just get whatever version of the M processor we're on with a Pro, because for what I want to do, the base model would probably work well enough, but the Pro just make it a little bit quicker, make it last a little longer for me, be significantly better for what I use a computer for. That's always been in my head. And then they came out with the M4. And the more I read, I'm like, actually, just the base M4 is going to be, especially with like what Caleb had just said, with all the hardware stuff on this new design of the Mac Mini, there is absolutely no reason for me to upgrade to the M4 Pro, because the only thing that I would be getting is a little more, like a little lifetime span extra, basically. It'd probably give me a few more years of life out of it versus the M4, and Thunderbolt 5 ports, which I don't need.
Yeah. Cannot honestly think of a reason for Thunderbolt 5 ports. There's no way I would use them.
What I've heard so far is there's one external hard drive that takes advantage of Thunderbolt 5 right now, because Thunderbolt 5 is just so new that companies haven't come out with products to support it yet. So currently, there's almost nothing that supports it. And like I said, it will future-proof your computer by having that. And it will give you a little bit extra lifespan of the computer. Like if you don't want to buy a computer for 15 years, maybe go for the Pro. But if you don't want to buy a computer for 10 years, you're going to be fine with the base model M4. Because, I mean, I've got an Intel machine that's from 2018 and is still running surprisingly well. If this was an Intel Windows computer, I would have gotten rid of it 3 years ago.
That's more to do with Windows than it is necessarily with it being Intel.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. But either way, I mean, the base model M4 Mac Mini is probably what I'm going to be buying when I upgrade my computer, because that would save me about $600 or more, depending on because I can utilize that education discount as well. And I also, just for funsies, I looked at how much I could get for my Mac Mini if I traded it in, and it would just base price would take it down to $464 for me, which, I mean, is only like they said it's like 130 some odd dollars is all I'd be getting for my computer. Mm-hmm. Honestly, though, I don't know. I mean, I could maybe sell it for maybe $200 at this point, maybe. So it's like, they're gonna take it off my hands for about what I could get out of it anyways. That's probably worth it for me, because I mean, I'm not going to be using this desktop after I buy a new one. So
yep. And that's the thing. I mean, I'd be passing my Mac Mini on to somebody else, but like Landon's wife already has a nicer computer than his.
Yes.
So
she's got a M2 MacBook Air, and I'm very jealous.
So yeah, that was this week in Apple news, and honestly, it was good news. Like, I didn't have any major complaints about any of the stuff they were announcing, and I really like this new design of the Mac Mini. I think it's a super cute little box, and it's got USB-C ports on the front. Yeah. Which, to be clear, just means that I'll be plugging a dongle in on the front instead of on the back. Like, it's not like it's actually that great of a thing to not have any USB-A ports on it. But considering the size of the chassis, I'm okay with it. There is one little weird, bizarre thing to note that people have sure been whining about a lot, and that's that the power button is on the bottom of the computer now, because there's not room for it on the back of the computer. Now, could they have put it like on the side or on the front or on the top? Absolutely, yes. They could have done any of those things, but they didn't. And I know why. It's because it's Apple. They want to hide the button somewhere, and okay, fine. Whatever. I will note that as a person who has been daily driving a Mac for a very long time, and in particular a Mac Mini, the only time I ever reach for the power button is when the power has gone out at my house. And it just does not happen that often.
Yeah.
So especially if you're hooked up to like some kind of a battery backup for your computer, you're probably never going to use that button. Like you will turn it on once and and then just leave it.
Yeah.
So
and it's also not like you don't have to lift the device up to hit the button. It is like, if you look at it, it's got the little fan and air vents on the bottom, and then the main aluminum chassis is raised a little bit from that, and it's underneath that aluminum chassis is where it actually sits.
Yeah.
So you can reach your finger underneath and just poke it from there. But again, like Caleb said, you don't need to turn off your computer very often, if ever. Like, some people are going to be like, well, don't you need to shut it down every once in a while to get, clean this cache? Or no, actually, a restart, I actually just recently learned this, a restart is actually better for your computer than just shutting it down and starting it back up again. If you do just a regular restart, it'll actually do all those benefits that you think shutting it down will do.
Yeah. And, it restarts automatically after software updates and yada, yada, yada. It's like, I've just heard somebody, it's all like, Apple can't stop putting things on the bottom of stuff. And I'm like, okay, but here's the thing. The Magic Mouse, it's actually a travesty because you have to use that port at least once a month to recharge your Mac. But I have gone like fully 4 to 5, 6 months at a stretch without ever pushing the power button on my Mac. So like, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
If they want to put the power button on the bottom, that's fine. Go ahead. If they're putting ports on the bottom, that's awful and horrible and stupid, and I agree with you. But no, the power button being on the bottom is fine. I do not care about that. So yeah, no, it's a great little computer. I like it. I'm probably going to get one. I think that the M4 iMac is also fine. I know a lot of people that would like that say they would like a, quote unquote pro iMac that's got the M4 Pro, that's got a bigger display on it and stuff like that. And I'm like, why do you want your display to go, like, to become obsolete after just a few years? Like, Apple puts really nice displays into the iMac, and then they don't give you any way to continue to use them after the usable life of your computer, despite the fact that the display itself is in perfectly good condition. Why be like that? Why would you want... I don't buy iMacs. I've never bought iMacs. The only iMac that I have ever paid money for was an old, G4 iMac, because that monitor's on a freaking swivel arm and it's the coolest computer ever made. And Apple is actually rumored to be making a HomePod that has a screen on a swivel arm like that. And I might buy one, I'm going to be honest, because those swivel arms are super cool. But anyways, so yeah, I don't get the iMac, but it seems like a nice update for the target audience of the iMac. And then, yeah, the MacBook Pros, look, they didn't raise the prices and the performance seems to be good. And they increased the base model RAM configurations and stuff like that. This is all good things. So, okay. Good week for the Mac.
Yeah. Also, going back to the power button, if for some reason you still find it dumb that they're putting it on the bottom and you want to, that's your main problem, I don't understand. That's weird. But it only weighs 1.5 pounds. And one, like somebody I heard somewhere say, it's like you could very easily get some, 3M Velcro strips, put those on the top and slap it on the back of your monitor. And then it's out of the way. You're not going to see it, which that's a nice thing. 2, then you could just reach behind your monitor and all of a sudden the power button is way more accessible. Problem solved. Non-problem solved.
And hey, then it's an all-in-one PC like an iMac. Yeah. But if you decide to just like unvelcro the computer and put a new one on in a few years, you can do that. It's just better all around.
Yes. I
So-
agree.
There you go.
Sweet. Well, this has been a minute since you've been happy about Macs and iPhones and things. So
I'm
This
still
is
not
great.
happy about the iPhone, but
Well-
the Mac, we're okay. We're doing
There
all
you
right here.
all right, let's move forward here. We got some Google news here. More of a question: is QuickShare coming to iOS?
That is a potential rumor, actually. So,
Yeah.
again, listener, you know this. I don't tend to talk about rumors unless they are something that I think is beneficial to you as a listener and potentially me as a user of, well, maybe future user of Android devices, because, I might switch back at some point.
That's
And
valid.
this feature would be, or is kind of one of those things that it doesn't keep me on iOS, but it's a massive benefit to iOS. So the feature QuickShare is basically what AirDrop is on iOS, but for Android devices. So they've basically made it work the exact same way from Android device to Android device, being able to share photos or links or contact information, basically like what AirDrop does. And you can also do it with the QuickShare app onto Windows devices. It is a very handy little tool. But there is in some code inside of the QuickShare code that the writer for Android Authority, we talked about him last week, Michel Ramon, he has found some code in there that suggests being able to have QuickShare on iOS and macOS. Now, it's not suggesting that Google is going to be doing this anytime soon. It's just it just says that iOS and macOS are a potential software version that will be able to accept QuickShare in the future, maybe. So, like I said, this is a very new and fresh rumor. So it could still be a couple years before anything actually comes about from this. But the potential that you'll be able to basically airdrop from your Android device to your MacBook or to your friend's iPhone or something like that is something I really would love to see actually happen. Now, you will have to actually download an app onto your device because it's not just going to work with iOS and macOS like AirDrop does. But if you do have the app, then it will basically work the same way. You just have to do maybe one or two extra presses of a button, which not a big deal. And if it's making it just as easy as it is to AirDrop, I love that. That's great. Now, you might say, well, with RCS on the iPhone now, is this really that big of a deal? Kind of. I mean, you can do more with the QuickShare stuff than you can by just sending text messages via RCS. So, yes, it is still nice to have, but I get where that argument comes from, because now you can send pictures via text message and still have them as in high quality. That is a nice thing, yes. But I still wish that this QuickShare thing would come, because there are more things you can do with it than you can over a text message.
Yeah. Well, and depending on your carrier, you still might not have RCS on your iPhone.
That is yep, that is true. Oh, that was one thing. So, listener, this is something I haven't brought up on the podcast, but I recently just switched over to Visible, which is an MVNO of Verizon Wireless. It's actually owned by Verizon, but it does also support RCS. So even some of these MVNOs that are, your pay-as-you-go type services, most of them do have RCS support. Some of them don't. So if that is important to you, definitely look into that before you switch carriers. But yeah. So if you don't have it, then this QuickShare feature would be beneficial. But I would assume that by the time this QuickShare app comes to iOS, if it ever does, you'll probably have RCS support. But either way, I still hope that this actually does come, because the main thing for my use case would be sharing to my computer, because I do that basically every time we record the podcast. I airdrop stuff from my computer or from my phone to my computer to do this, and that would be really nice. It's a nice feature. I love it. So if I could do that with an Android phone, it makes it a little bit easier for me to switch back. Again, not saying I'm going to, because the main thing that keeps me on iOS is this freaking watch. Stupid Apple. But yeah, so Quick Share might be coming to iOS in the future.
Nice. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's move forward here. Microsoft. Well, not too big of news, but we have talked about this in the podcast. Microsoft is delaying recall again. This is actually they're saying on this article, it says this is the third time they've done it. Obviously, the first time they did it, it was because of all the negative press, and they pushed it further from there, and then they said it was actually going to be October, and as of recording, it's now November 3rd. And on the 31st, they said, we're going to push it to December. The reason why is they said they want to ensure delivering important updates and taking additional time to refine the experience before previewing it. So,
My gosh, Microsoft. Like, to be clear, I'm not even going to give Windows 11 a second glance until the headline reads, Microsoft cancels recall. That's what it'll take, Microsoft. At this point, nobody is making a bigger argument for me to switch entirely to Linux than Microsoft. Like,
yeah.
They are the biggest proponent for Linux on the desktop right now. Inadvertently.
Yeah. Like,
because of Windows 11. But geez Louise, guys.
yeah. So, I mean, that's what it is. That's what they said. It's nothing big, but since we've talked about recall, and it's kind of a big thing, really. I mean, it's the big main feature they're trying to push with this Copilot plus PCs. And
yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, so it's delayed. That's pretty much, really, that's all it's got. But
good.
On there, so. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. Looks like we're going to get into some gaming news here. First on here, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp complete.
Yes. So, listener, past few podcast episodes, we have, well, and I guess it's been a little bit longer than that, back when I guess we first started talking about the Don't Kill Games initiative, right? And we discussed briefly the sort of the dichotomy between, like, users wanting to be able to have games that they've put money into forever, and developers who are hosting live service games not being, like, it not making sense for them to continue to host them, you know, past a certain point when the player base isn't big enough, or, you know, they're not bringing enough revenue, or, you know, whatever reason. And just how, like, there's got to be some kind of a balance there. And, you know, we've talked about a couple of different theoretical ways that we can help resolve that. I think, bafflingly, Nintendo has cracked it. So,
yeah,
listener, you probably don't remember Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. You might, I suppose, but if you do, you're in the minority of people at large. A few years ago, we were quite excited when Nintendo was bringing some of their IPs to mobile-first games being developed for phones. Super Mario Run, obviously, was the first one, and got a lot of press, a lot of attention, being a Mario platformer designed from the ground up for one-handed play on a smartphone. You look at the one that I totally still have on my phone, Fire Emblem Heroes is what it's called.
Yeah.
Trying to remember what the subtitle was there. But, you know, again, it's basically a take on what's a one-handed phone version of a Fire Emblem game gonna look like, and they built a game around that. They had, weirdly, a game based around, like, Mii's from the Wii. That was the thing that existed for a little while, but they shut down fairly quickly because I think maybe 10 people actually downloaded it. And then when, you know, during the pandemic, when everything was really bad and Animal Crossing was one of the most popular things on the planet, they've released a phone version of Animal Crossing called Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. This was a freemium game, meaning that it was free to download and play, but you could pay money for premium features inside of the app. And people did. People downloaded the game, people played it, people spent money on it, but over the years, obviously interest in it has just kind of petered out. Not that many people are playing it anymore. And it's gotten to a low enough level that Nintendo doesn't see any future in maintaining the live service online portions of the game. So what they have done is developed a separate game called Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Complete, which is an entirely offline version of Pocket Camp that you can that you can purchase, and it's a nominal price. It's like $5 or something like that, just for an app. And it is a non-live service, non-online, just mobile game that you can just download and pay. There's no microtransactions or anything like that, and requires, from Nintendo's perspective, very, very little effort to maintain and update. And part of it is that they're adding in the ability to transfer your saved data from the original Pocket Camp to Pocket Camp Complete. So if you have dumped a bunch of money into Pocket Camp, you want to maintain all of your progress, maintain all of the stuff that you have, you just have to download Pocket Camp Complete. It's another $5 purchase, but you've already spent a bunch of money on this game, so probably that's worth it to you. And then you can keep all of the stuff that you have saved when Animal Crossing Pocket Camp just gets killed here in like next year, I think, early next year. So that's actually a pretty good way to do this, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's, wow, Nintendo.
Yeah, of all the companies, Nintendo.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, this is really so much like, it's obviously not going to be exactly the same game. Like the ability to visit people's like islands or camps, to visit people's camps and that kind of thing. Like you're losing out on that. You're losing out on the social aspects of the game, but not entirely. They've got some features in the game that are going to allow you to do like a direct peer-to-peer connection with somebody else that has Pocket Camp Complete, and you'll be able to kind of share and interact with each other in that way without Nintendo having to have all of this online infrastructure in place. And so it becomes easy for Nintendo to maintain, and they basically just have to maintain it with basic bug fixes and periodic minor updates to keep it on app stores. And that's it. So that's honestly, it's probably like we pay one guy to do that,
That's
like we
amazing.
have a single engineer to maintain this thing. And the people who have been playing the game for years get to keep all of their progress. They get to keep all the stuff that they've paid money for, and they get to continue having and playing the game that they paid for. And that is a really great balance, right? It's like Nintendo didn't have to do this.
No.
They really didn't. They could have just killed the game, but they didn't. They like threw a bone to the players like, hey, you played this game, you'd enjoy this game. Here's a version of the game that you can keep playing when we shut down the online services.
Wow. Good job, Nintendo.
Cool.
Yeah. That's cool. I hope some people in the industry are taking note. We'll
Seriously.
See. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the new segment here that talks about, hey, play this instead. So instead of playing Dragon Age Veilguard, we have a couple things here that Caleb's going to tell you.
Yes. So, once again, considering that any game that you buy and put money into could be just yoinked away from you by the developer, like Nintendo could have done with Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, Dragon Age The Veilguard. It's the latest Dragon Age game, released this past week. Generally speaking, has been getting pretty decent reviews. People seem to enjoy, particularly the combat. People are having a lot of fun with the combat. It's a complete rework versus previous Dragon Age games. It's a little bit more like kind of action RPG, Mass Effect style, a little bit more along those lines than it is along the traditional Dragon Age, which is a bit more turn-based in the way the combat works. And it's a BioWare RPG. People seem to think that the characters are pretty good and the story seems like it's okay. Obviously, I I haven't like watched through any like major spoilery reviews, so I can't exactly say for sure whether or not the game, like the story, holds up toward the end of the game. But initial impressions seem to be pretty good. People are liking the game. However, you're just licensing this game. You pay $60 for the thing, you don't actually own it, and BioWare/EA, who, let's be honest, it would be EA that would do this, could just take the game without any warning. You would have no say in the matter. So, if you want to avoid that, here's a few things you can play instead of Dragon Age the Veilguard. On GOG.com, you could just go play Dragon Age Origins. Let's be honest. A Dragon Age game is a Dragon Age game. Yes, the graphics are older. Yes, the combat's going to be a bit more clunky. But if you're there for a BioWare RPG, which essentially means you have your player character, you have your party of characters that you gather to your camp around your player character, and then you get to pick which ones you want to smooch, then Dragon Age Origins is going to hit all of those notes for you, possibly even better than the Veilguard, just depending on how averse you are to kind of low poly graphics. So that's one option. You can buy it, you can download it, you can stick it on a thumb drive. Nobody at GOG, BioWare, or EA has the ability to take that game away from you at any point in the future at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Other options, if you're just really into the role-playing, you want something that feels a little bit newer and more in-depth necessarily than Dragon Age Origins, just from a role-playing standpoint, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is just one of the best Western RPGs ever made. And the story is outstanding. The characters are amazing. Obviously, it's not got the BioWare romancing stuff, but there are romances inside of the story if you really want to engage with that aspect of it. It's an incredible game. Highly recommended. If, however, you've been looking at the Veilguard and kind of thinking to yourself, you know what? Actually, this combat looks really fun. It's a little bit more hack and slashy kind of action RPG type stuff than in previous games. Technically, that is sort of what the combat in The Witcher 3 is like. However, even more so, the combat in The Witcher 2 is more like that, right? It's a little bit more hack and slashy. It's a little bit less RPG, a little bit more action. And so if that's kind of what you're looking for, you could do, one of those two games from the Witcher franchise. Also on GOG.com. Can also download them, stick them on a thumb drive, and nobody can take it away from you at that point. However, if you're looking for a game that integrates real-time action RPG combat with more of a traditional style, like heavily role-playing influenced RPG, like Western fantasy RPG, the Elder Scrolls franchise, guys, like a good chunk of that is on GOG. You can get Morrowind. It's like $14. You can get Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 4. That one I think is like $20, $25. If you want to spend $30 on Skyrim again, you can do that. You can get Skyrim for $30. You can get the anniversary edition for $50, all on GOG.com. DRM free. You download, stick it on a thumb drive. Nobody can take it away from you at that point. So honestly, if you are super duper into Western RPGs, there's a chance that you have, in fact, already played all of the games that I just listed. But I suspect that out of this list of at least five games, I guess I only listed 3 games from the Elder Scrolls franchise. There are other games in the Elder Scrolls franchise. But obviously Elder Scrolls Online, that's a subscription, so that doesn't count for this segment. And then the older ones, I'm not sure you can get those on GOG, but you can definitely play them on archive.org. So yeah, like I feel like there's probably a pretty good chance, listener, that if you're interested in the Veilguard, there's one of these games at least that you haven't played and might be worth considering if you don't want to give EA any power over your ability to play games in the future. So there you go.
And those are great games. So
yeah. Just a list of fantasy RPGs is pretty easy to find some good games in there.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit more about some games here and talk about Call of Duty here. So, listener, if you, I guess, have been living under a rock, I mean, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to tech stuff, and I knew this because of how much is being touted. Call of Duty broke Game Pass signups records on launch day. Well, that's the one thing I want to talk about. But to give a little more insight, obviously the fiscal earnings for Microsoft had come out, and they talked about this, but we're going to talk real fast. The year-over-year growth for Xbox, they made 61% more now year-over-year. Now, 53% of that was Activision Blizzard. So, yes. Thank you for that. Now, they did talk about Black Ops 6 with the release. They said that it was, let's see if I can find this here. It said it was number 1 on not only being purchased on Steam and PlayStation for any Call of Duty ever, they also said it broke Game Pass sign-up records. Now, obviously they didn't say how much, or we know what Game Pass sign-ups or what the number is, but they did say it broke it. So it's over 60% year over year. Cool. Now, I mean, you made a lot of money, Call of Duty, with all that. Now, the question is, now this is even without, they took away the, remember back in the day you could sign up for Game Pass for $1 for 3 months. They took that away. They took away a lot of things before this launch happened to be like, hey, if you're signing up, you're signing up. Like, you're going to pay that $20. So Game Pass Ultimate is $20, and that's day one. If you get the Game Pass Standard, you don't get the day one.
Yep.
So this is the $20. So the question I have here, let's give them their congratulations. Yay, they got their millions of dollars. Do we really think the signups will stay more than a month or however long it stays? Like, they pay the $20, call it good. That's the question I have. Like, how many of these subs will go more than a month?
I think that this is kind of a hard one to answer because, on the one hand, I think that a good chunk of the people who would have been interested in Call of Duty at all, and certainly would have paid for it, there's, for Black Ops, especially this one, which actually has been getting pretty good reviews.
Yes,
like
has. Very good.
The campaign is actually a campaign.
Good.
It's not like 2 hours long. And
it's a continuation of one of the favorite ones. I can't remember. Please forget. It's like Black Ops 2 or 3. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's a Black Ops campaign. Yeah. Whatever. The zombies mode evidently is significantly better than the previous couple of iterations of the zombies mode. Like, they've leaned back into just the outright absurdity of it, as opposed to trying to make it like grimdark and serious. They're like, you know what? This is insane. We'll just lean into that. And yeah, generally people have really liked it. And I think that there is a really sizable chunk of the Call of Duty player base that just want to play the campaign and the zombies mode, right? They bought a month of Game Pass. They downloaded the game. They played through the campaign. It took them like 3 days. They're just going to hammer zombies mode for the next month. And then that's all they were ever going to play the game. And so for them, what they're seeing is, I paid $20 and I got exactly as much out of it when I bought it full price a few years ago, when I was paying $60 for a Black Ops game. The question is, are the people that are there for the multiplayer going to keep paying for Game Pass? And I just have a sneaking suspicion that the people that are there for the multiplayer were like, I'm not going to subscribe to Game Pass just to play Call of Duty multiplayer. I'll just go buy the game and then have the multiplayer. I'm already paying, but that's the thing, is they're already paying a subscription for Xbox Live if they're on the Xbox. So that's Game Pass gives you if they're on
exactly.
So PC Game Pass, let's say, they actually just said Game Pass. They actually didn't say Game Pass Ultimate. They just said sign up.
It's true.
So
for all versions of Game Pass.
all
So
versions.
I think if they're on the console, they're probably already subscribed to Game Pass so that they can play multiplayer games anyways, because that includes Xbox Live. And so, yeah, they probably didn't really gain anything from that. There might be some console gamers, like I said, that aren't interested in the multiplayer, don't pay for, Game Pass Ultimate because they don't care about Xbox Live. They just want to do the single player stuff. And they probably saw this as a way to save $40. And no, they're definitely not going to stay for more than a month. And then it's really just a question of how many of the PC players looked at this and went, yeah, I'll pay for this as opposed to just buying the game. Because I think that a lot of the folks that are in it for the multiplayer are going to be like, okay, I guess I could pay for Game Pass, but after 5 months, it's added up to the cost of this game anyways. I'm not interested in any of the other games on Game Pass, so I may as well just buy this game, and then I'm just going to play Call of Duty multiplayer forever and ever and ever. So I don't know. It's kind of weird, but I feel like for most of the people that would have actually signed up for Game Pass just to play Call of Duty Black Ops, the only way that makes sense in most people's head is if they're planning on canceling after a month, or if they were already interested in the service to begin with, and this was them just finally pulling the trigger. So I'm not sure what the ratio is for that, but I will bet that they're going to see, thousands of cancellations after the end of the first month.
I wondered. I really do. Just I started thinking, I'm like, okay, you got all these people that signed up for Call of Duty. What's coming down the road? Like, would someone be like, all right, so you got your Indiana Jones that's coming from Machine Games, which I've been hearing positivity from it, but
yeah.
But is that, and for some friggin' reason, I can't think of anything else on the top of my head. But
I don't think that there's a ton of overlap with the Call of Duty audience and games like that.
Yeah.
Like the Call of Duty people are basically, they're going to play Call of Duty and then they're going to go back to playing Fortnite and Apex Legends.
Yeah,
like that's
the same. Yep.
These people are not interested in, an Indiana Jones / Tomb Raider game. Like,
yeah. No, I wondered what they have that would be next to hold that group of people. So I just didn't know what you'd think if they would, if there's other games. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I can't think of any.
It'd be interesting. That was the question, because I all the signups and everything. I just wonder. I do feel that there is going to be, obviously, as people sign up, you do the campaign, like you said, do the campaign, do zombies. Okay, I'm done. Then I'm done. But I actually wonder how big that exodus would be. Honestly, I don't know. This would be interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be really hard to track too, because Microsoft sure as heck isn't going to advertise the exodus.
I know, right? Yeah, no kidding. Well, it was just a question what you guys thought. Landon, do you have anything on it you want to say, or were you even listening? Were you just?
I was paying attention.
Were you downloading Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Complete?
No, I've never played Animal Crossing. It's never really interested me. But no, I was paying attention because of the quote unquote modern video games that I've played, Call of Duty is one of them. But it was like the first Call of Duty.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a franchise that still exists. I don't know if I would consider that modern.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't. I could see, just so I can have some input, I guess, I could see people that weren't into Game Pass previously, they get into it, they see, oh, there are a wide variety of games. Maybe they'll stick on for a month or over a month. They may not last more than 3 months, but they could stay on for a couple months because, it's relatively cheaper.
Around.
Yeah, and just poke around at different games, see if they're interested. And if they are, okay, yeah, maybe they'll stay. But I would still say that's probably going to be, maybe 50% of people do that. And then you get maybe 25% of people that just stay on because they forgot.
Yeah, you forgot you signed up.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens with all subscriptions, but no, I just wondered. I wanted to bring something up to that because, give credit where it is. I mean, they made their money, they got what they wanted, and with Game Pass being such a new thing, it's interesting to speculate about. Okay, would Call of Duty even keep you on for how long, or if more than a month? So that's why I brought up that question. All right. Well, that's the end of our gaming news here. We're going to go into a section here that is one of our favorite sections.
Yes. Okay. Listener, this is I'm disappointed to say that I did not realize that this was going to happen the minute that this particular product we're going to talk about launched. But it is, in fact, time to talk about how Doom modders are the best people on the internet. Now, this headline is so obvious in retrospect that, like I said, I was genuinely upset with myself for not realizing that this would happen as quickly as it did. The headline from PC Gamer is, in just 3 days, the state of Nintendo Alarmo hacking went from it loads a cat JPEG to it runs Doom better than a lot of PCs back in the day. So, yes. First reported by Eurogamer, there was a Nintendo hardware enthusiast who has gotten himself an Alarmo smart clock that we were, talking about a couple of weeks back, and has got Doom running on it. On the little display, it just shows Doom, and you can actually control the game by using the controls on the alarm clock itself. It's got like the little bell on top that spins. You can rotate that to turn left or right in the game. You push down on it to walk forward, and then you can fire using the buttons on the side of the clock.
That's amazing.
This is a dumb way to play Doom. Just like all of these weird Doom mods are kind of stupid ways to play Doom. Like, I don't know if either of you actually went and found the Tim Allen Doom mod and tried to play that. It was so hard to see anything in that game.
Just because it was just all Tim Allen shooting.
It was just Tim Allen.
It was all Tim Allen and all.
Oh man. So yes, like I said, I should have seen this one coming. The minute Nintendo said, we made a proprietary alarm clock, I should have just assumed that it would be less than a week after the thing launched before somebody was playing Doom on it. And here we are. So, there you go. Doom modders. Man, I don't get them, but it's cool.
It's so
They're
fun
great
to see, though. It is. All right. Well, I think that's going to be the end of our episode. Unless, Landon, you got one more thing for us?
Yes, I do. I had to leave you hanging there a little bit to make you think that I didn't have something, listener. But I do actually have something. And it actually, ties in with kind of what we were just talking about with Nintendo. So, not only did Nintendo launch an alarm clock a while ago and that you can now run Doom on, I'm sure that this new service that they are providing will eventually have some sort of Doom on it because people are going to do that because, they can. Now, well, maybe. I don't know. This one might be a little bit harder to hack into. But Nintendo announced its own music streaming service.
Oh, yeah.
And
what?
Called Nintendo Music. And I actually genuinely do not hate this as a product. I kind of just wish that it was available on Apple Music or Spotify or, and I'm sure people are going to make playlists on those services based on this app. So what this is, listener, is it's just music from first-party Nintendo games that you can listen to just by itself. You don't have to be inside the game. You don't have to go to YouTube to listen to it. You can just go to this app and just start listening to it. And it's actually, I think, quite brilliant. This is the type of music that at least for me, if I'm doing something where I can't actually like listen, where I don't want words, or I can't listen to a podcast, if I just want some background noise, but I, again, don't want words, and I, for some reason, don't want to just listen to a soundtrack of some sort, then this is that type of music, It's just, I actually really, really like this. It's really cool. And one of the really cool features on it is not all the songs do this, but a certain amount of songs below the play button, there's what do they call it? An extension button, I believe is what it is. And it basically it kind of loops certain songs. It'll like extend it out and loop it to an extent. And like one of the examples they showed off in the video with this announcing this app was up to 60 minutes of a 2-minute song. Basically like an intro, like a menu song. Like, you go into a game, you're just at the start menu, the music playing in the background. It's made to just loop because if you're just sitting there, it'll still sound good. So you can do something like that if you want to. But I really like this. It's really cool. It's just Nintendo being Nintendo, and I love it. And if you are a Nintendo Switch Online member right now, then you have access to this app. Like, you're basically subscribed to Nintendo Music just by having a Nintendo Switch Online membership. So,
yep.
If you are one of those, then you should just go try this just for fun, because the nostalgia kick might just be good enough, at least for a good 10, 20 minutes or so, something like that. There's not a ton of games right now. I think the list is about 22 games right at the moment, but they are going to add more. And it goes like, there's games that are like new games right now, all the way back to the original NES and the original Game Boy. So it's got a wide variety of styles of music and genres and different. It's pretty cool. I actually really like this. And again, I do think that there will be user created playlists on both Apple Music and Spotify based around this type of thing, but I really like it. So there you go. That's my one more thing for this week.
So as I just found this out and downloaded it instantly, because guess who subscribes to it? So I'm like, oh, okay. So it is a separate app. Download it, and I'm looking through this. I signed in. Now the question I'm looking to see, and maybe Caleb, you could look at it since you are in my family plan.
Yep.
I wonder if you'd have access to this.
I
or
actually
if it's
can
to the
confirm
subscriber.
that yes, I did read that if anybody who is in a family of a subscriber, like, they all get access to it. So it's like a family plan type thing too. So yes, I could totally download it. And honestly, I should maybe do that. Like, my kids would get such a kick out of that. I will say that, like, there's one downside on this point, because I have always said that I'm never going to feel bad about pirating a game or game related thing for a game that is no longer being sold. Like, it cannot be purchased anywhere legitimately. Okay, download it illegally. Whatever. I don't care. That's just, Nintendo doesn't have a right to get mad at you about stuff that they don't sell. And up until this, that applied to a lot of Nintendo game soundtracks. They literally don't sell them in the United States. You cannot purchase the things. And so it was like, well, okay, go find yourself a download of it somewhere then, I suppose. But, well, I guess I can't say that anymore, because you can now listen to it legitimately. So there you go.
There was one thing I did fail to mention. There's also a spoiler-free listening method. So if there's a game on there that has music that you haven't played that game for, and you don't want to listen to the music until you've actually, until you're playing the game, because sometimes the music goes well enough with the game that it may not give away exactly what's going to happen, but there are some potential spoilers involved with that. You can turn on spoiler-free mode and select which music you don't want to have come up just randomly if you're just listening on a random playlists or something like that, then you can do that. And that's actually really cool as well.
It's quite interesting. I didn't know that this was here.
It is brand new as of like a few days ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like
So-
Thursday, I think.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, we're going to definitely be up to date on the music, Nintendo music at this household for a while. Man, that's amazing. Well, there you go. Oh, all right. Well, let me close that browser to go back to this one. I opened it up to search this immediately. Okay. Well, that's a sweet one more thing. What a way to end it. We got some pretty cool Doom news for Nintendo, for the Nintendo clock, and music. Awesome. I think that's a pretty good win for ending the episode. Nintendo, and Nintendo's the only one helping with the Animal Cross, or the Animal
Yeah.
Crossing thing we talked about. So freaking
Yeah.
3 out of 3, Nintendo.
What on earth? Nintendo good guy this week. What?
Yeah.
All right. Well, listener, we appreciate you listening all the way to the end, and as far as you've listened to us. If you want to get a hold of us, you can on our social media platforms. You can also get a hold of us on callingoutplatforms.com. You can check out any cool videos that might be coming on YouTube.
Yeah, sure.
Or just check out the sweet videos that are there. Or Calling Out Platform Games over there. All right, dear listener, have a good week.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Calling All Platforms is a production of Supporter Sound Studios. To learn more about how you can support the podcast, go to www.patreon.com/callingallplatforms.